I was blown back by this, and this is one of those smack your forehead articles. You're like, look at it. You're like, why didn't someone think of this ahead of time? This looks ingenious. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eric Planey,
I'm Lucas Finko.
and together on September 10th, almost said 9th, 2021, we are the very rusty Pirates of Clean Tech. Yar,
Yarg.
yar.
Arg.
How you doing, Lucas? It's been a long time.
Yeah, I'm good. It's good to be here. It's good to be back. How are you, Eric?
I'm great. I had a great summer. All right, so before we go into the main body of our podcast, I thought I would take a few seconds to just apologize to our listeners that we almost suddenly went off the air in the spring with our podcast. That was really on me. I had some issues I had to take care of, in the work-life balance area, and those have been rectified. And as a result of that, we're going to kind of restart Pirates, and we're going to be as strategic and diligent as possible. But we're happy to be back, and it's a good thing because we at one point were really gaining a tremendous audience in Pirates, and we hope to bring back that audience as quickly as possible. Happy to be back. I have moved on, and happy to say that starting next week, I'm going to be starting a new position in the world of clean technology. We'll probably have a little bit more information about that in the coming weeks as we get more public, but very excited about what the future has in store for us, and really happy to be back on the Pirates of Clean Tech, educating our listeners about what's going on in clean tech and ESG and seeing where we go from there.
Yeah, big congratulations to you, Eric. It's good to have you in the industry finally
Finally.
and fighting the good fight. So we look forward to learning more about that and seeing what happens with your new venture.
It was funny, as I was leaving my last week on the job in financial services and banking, had a lot of people reach out to me, current and past coworkers, really congratulating me. And a lot of people get this impression that kind of migrating or transitioning from something like financial services to clean tech was just kind of happened overnight. And I had to explain it. It really goes back to the fall of 2015 is when I met Lucas and the whole gang at the NYU Energy Finance Program. And since then, I was always looking for opportunities, but not the right one presented itself. Then we all had kind of the COVID pause where everything got delayed. So, things like this don't happen overnight. So, to all those who are thinking about transitioning their career into clean technology, you really have to kind of create that roadmap about how you're going to do it. And feel free to do some initiatives on your own aside from your job, even if it's volunteer work in the clean tech space, to help get you integrated into it so that if you want to make the jump, you can do so successfully.
Right. There's plenty you can do. There's plenty of climate tech and climate awareness organizations in your area. There's lots of things you can do to help out. So, yeah.
That's right. That's right. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Well, kind of thinking about our old format, first off, I have to give a shout out to one of our other pirates, Rob Parker, who sent a pirate eye patch that I never actually worn. I'm not going to put it on right now, but I feel like since this is, our regeneration of Pirates of Clean Tech, I just want Rob to know it is here at my desk. So and I'm enjoying this afternoon with a very cool German drink called a Rattler. And if for those of you that don't know, you take a good Hefeweizen. In this case, I took Leinenkugel summer candy, and I combined it with Sprite Zero, and I have some ice in there, and it makes an incredibly nice post Labor Day, Indian summer type of cooling refreshment.
Cool. I'm drinking Sam Adams Oktoberfest. 'Tis the season for Oktoberfest. I don't know. They move it forward every year, and they run out of inventory fast. So make sure you go get some.
I wonder if they're doing Oktoberfest this year, if it's still kind of under COVID quarantine, because it's usually end of September.
Yeah, I don't know what Germany's up to nowadays. I don't know.
I suspect if they do it, you'd probably have to be fully either vaccinated or have a negative test like 15 minutes before you walk in.
Well, you can't wear a mask.
that would defeat the purpose. One of my greatest memories in graduate school is being in Stuttgart for the they call it the Volksfest, the People's Fest, and having 3,000 drunk Germans standing on our tables, and a Lederhosen band is playing "Sweet Home Alabama" by Leonard Skinner, and just hearing "Sweet Home Alabama."
Sounds like the Germany I know and love.
Yeah, exactly right. So Hey, before we get into our articles, just a quick, really want to give a shout out again. And unfortunately, we've done this a couple times, but in this week after Hurricane Ida, in Louisiana, obviously, and the East Coast got hit very hard, and there was tremendous loss of life. So we certainly pay our respects to those families who are suffering from losses right now. But as always, we want to give a shout out to our utility workers who are still probably on the scene, especially in Louisiana, coming from across the United States and being in state and in region, trying to get power back on. It's a thankless job, and there are unsung heroes right now keeping our grid operating. So, Lucas, being a former utility guy yourself, you always like to say a few words.
Yeah, I've heard there's more than 1 million people that lost power during the hurricane. So I know it's going to take a long time to get those people back up. We all saw the pictures of the transmission lines that were destroyed. So that's a big problem. That's going to take a long time to repair. So it's going to take a lot of hard work by a lot of hardworking people to get the people of Louisiana back into power. So our thoughts and prayers are with them.
Yeah, no lie. So, that was, if you want to talk about why we're on the air and why we're doing Pirates of Clean Tech, and why the world, especially in the United States recently, is really embracing the fight against climate change, just look what's happening in the United States. You have a bone dry Western United States that's suffering horribly from wildfires that are getting worse and worse every summer. You have a soaking wet, flooded East Coast that's had so much rain, partially from the intensity of hurricanes over the last couple of weeks. These hurricanes are not just simply going into land and dissipating, they're staying powerful as they migrate either up the East Coast or crisscrossing over the Southeast. And, we're seeing tremendous flooding and just the intensity. We'll talk about that in one of my articles, but um, this is why we're here. And, we have a lot of targets we need to hit as a global community. The US needs to be doing their part. We seem to have a lot of momentum at the federal level, but as one of our other pirates, Cassandra, recently said to me on a phone call, it's really the state and local level is where the action is taking place. So let's step it up and keep it going.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm excited. You want to get into it?
Let's get into it. Okay, so this is Jamie LaRue from the Detroit Free Press, August 30th. GM not confident, quote unquote, LG Chem will build defect-free Bolt batteries. Talk about a shot across the bow with a great partnership. This one is not the most optimistic article, but I think I wanted to highlight it because obviously we got a situation right now where General Motors and other OEMs are struggling on making electric vehicles and hybrids because of a chip shortage. But on top of that, the technology is still not where it needs to be in terms of completely proving itself. And here's a case where General Motors is going to keep its Orion, Michigan assembly plant idled and not even start repairs on normal, I think they said 140,000 Chevy Bolt EVs and EUVs. They're not even going to do the recall repairs until it's confident that its partner, LG Chem, can make a defect-free EV battery that does not pose a potential fire risk. Now, obviously, this is about General Motors, and full disclosure, I am a GM shareholder. And so I am a big fan of GM. I've bought a lot of GM cars in my life. Unfortunately, some Chevy Bolts have been known to catch fire. Teslas have been known to catch fire. The batteries haven't been completely defect free. And of course, the anti-green movement would say, well, look, these things are dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. But I think in the history of time, it'll show, first off, historically, in ICE engines, internal combustion engines, have had their share of spontaneous fires as well related to XYZ accidents. So let's not put this, let's put it in context. And then secondly, nothing is going to be perfect, but the striving to be perfect is where the clean tech field is going to take us. So this is not an article. I really hope GM and LG solve these problems. LG Chem has been a partner to GM going back to the first Chevy Volt with a V. So they need to get through this and they need to work through it. And it's not going to shake my confidence in both GM and LG getting and delivering a world-class electric vehicle in the future.
Yeah, agreed. I'm an owner of one of these bolts. I've received my recall notice, and this is quite reassuring to me, right? That we're not going to start recall repairs until we're confident LG can build defect-free products. I mean, what's the point of doing a recall when you haven't fixed the problem yet? So yeah, this is confidence inspiring. I no longer keep my vehicle indoors. I no longer charge it indoors. I never charged it to 90%, over 90% anyhow. So they're going to replace all the modules in the vehicles, which is great for me because I get a new battery in my Bolt, and I get another 8-year warranty on top of that. So, you're exactly right. People forget that, a tank of gasoline is explosive and flammable also. And there was an issue in the 80s with one of the manufacturers when it was in a collision that the whole car would explode. And so these are normal growing pains of an industry, right? So
You're talking about is that the Ford Pinto? If you rear-ended a Ford
yes,
Pinto?
yes, correct.
What was that one movie, that spoof movie, Spies Like Us, where they had this like
Yeah.
indestructible Russian tank and it went over a ridge and nobody could blow it up, but it went over the ridge and accidentally ran into a Pinto and then the tank blew up. Well, look, I think Lucas, you touched on something very important. I think if for those of you that own EVs and want to be cautious, if you don't need to for your daily commute, then don't charge your battery to 100%. Charge it to 80%, 90%, and just keep it there. And I think that's a smart thing to do because it's really at that like that last point of filling up is when you have what they call thermal runaway or a higher risk of thermal runaway. So, people, if you feel a little bit hesitant, don't park your car in a garage that's either under the house or part of the house if you feel a little bit nervous, but also just don't charge your battery if you don't need to 100%.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we're going to be rapid fire here. This is out of National Geographic, and this is from August 31st, and I believe the author is Sarah Gibbons. And this one, is something I think we're all reading about over the last week, but it's entitled "How Climate Change is Fueling Hurricanes Like Ida." And subheadline is "Hurricanes Feed Off Heat, a Growing Source of Fuel in a Warming World." I was very surprised. My wife and I were actually on vacation in Bermuda, which is certainly an island that watches hurricanes. And as Ida was making landfall, almost right up into landfall, it was a Category 1 hurricane. And I thought to myself, well, this is good in the fact that it's not going to be as strong as people thought. But the scientists actually nailed it. They said that this one really has a capacity by landfall of becoming Hurricane 4, Category 4, and it did. Yeah. And the reason why it was able to do so is that the water is so warm, and this is directly attributable to climate change, that the water is a fuel, is acting as an absolute fuel to increase the intensity right up before landfall. So it's either harder to either forecast the intensity, or you're going to have to assume the worst, that the intensity has the ability of ramping up to Category 4, Category 5, right when at the least favorable moment, right when it makes landfall. And look what happened as a result. It had so much fuel that Ida crisscrossed the southeast part of the United States and then caused remnant devastation in our home states of New Jersey and New York. A lot of devastation in New Jersey, in the suburbs of New York City, and New York City itself. So many tragic deaths of people who were in their basement apartments, and then all of a sudden had flash flooding. So it's going to get harder and harder to forecast how ferocious these are going to be, and it's going to get harder and harder to respond to them. So we are seeing the effects of climate change, and I thought this Nat Geo story really kind of crystallized on the science related as to why.
Yeah, it said they do studies where they can actually do the difference between with and without global warming and show how the intensity changes, and these studies take months to do, so we won't know for Ida for a while, but they've proven it for some of the past storms. And this reminds me also of the Great Pause. I don't know if you remember the Great Pause in the 2000s. Climate change scientists were getting a lot of criticism in the 2000s because it appeared that global warming was slowing in the atmosphere. And what they did is they did some more studies on this, and they found out that the heat was moving from the atmosphere to the ocean. And that's why the atmosphere wasn't heating up as much, which is like, oh, great, we figured that out. But wait a minute, a heating ocean is really bad, right? Because now you have a hotter ocean, you have more powerful hurricanes. And you kind of see it on this graph too. This is sea surface temperatures. Look at them just skyrocket here right at the start of the century. This is really bad for storms like this because they feed off of that hot surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. So, Yeah,
So,
it makes sense to me that what they're saying here.
so we have a lot of situations here, with rising water temperatures in the oceans. First off, we're losing our ice caps on the polar north and polar south, which is unfortunate. So we have rising sea levels. We have the heated water acting as a fuel, which we just talked about. And now, because of changes in salinization of the oceans, we're even losing, like in the UK, they're losing access to the warmer waters from the Gulf Stream. It may actually lose its capacity to kind of have that circular generation of bringing warmer waters to the Northeast. So they expect more climate volatility as a result of that. So we're seeing a lot, and it's very negative, and we had to bring it up. And this is something that we're going to be keeping an eye on, because we don't want to keep on our podcast every week talking about those who lost their lives from hurricanes and utility workers working overtime to repair our infrastructure. We need to take care of this as soon as possible.
Yeah. All right. Next
All
up.
right. My third and last article, we're keeping it short and sweet, but I do want to end a little bit of a positive note. So, business edition, business section of The Economist from August 21st. I love the subtitle, Climate Tech's Netscape Moment. Go back up.
Yeah.
Billions are pouring into the business of decarbonization. Wall Street giants and corporate titans are betting on climate innovation. This is music to my ears, to Lucas's ears, and many of our friends, because again, it's a great article. You don't have to, it's not behind the paywall. You just have to register with The Economist to read it. But we're talking about all the money that's going into climate innovation. And as a former banker, I'm seeing it among all the banks who are focusing on their ESG strategies. Banks like JP Morgan are setting up, programs and divisions that are dedicated to green financing that goes all the way from, climate tech to ag tech. And this is incredible. And so even though, there's always ebbs and flows in the momentum, especially in Washington on the federal level, depending who's in charge of Congress and the White House, I think that's becoming less and less relevant as time goes on, because of what we're seeing at the state, local level, but what we're seeing in the private market level. Okay, the investments are taking place because there's a market generated return on these investments that's being forecasted. So the numbers are ridiculous. I mean, they're saying 2021, it could be 60 billion alone in investment, which is almost double from 36 billion last year. And the big worry is, of course, is this a boom bust cycle? And I think it is going to have some booms and busts associated with it. Some technologies are not going to pan out, but I think the trend over the next 20 years is going to be significant. Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously great to see. We welcome them. I feel like we've known this has been needed for many years, so it's great to see them come along. This is global investment in energy transition. This is $500 billion, so that's a lot. And this doesn't seem like the typical greenwashing I see too, right? This is renewable energy. This is electrified transport. This is electrification, right, of heat. So this is real, clean technology that's being invested in, instead of just, people
That's
taking
right.
existing tech and calling it green, right?
And look, I still think there is probably some classic definition of greenwashing taking place. However, transparency is improving in that investment sector. So people are going to be more realistic about what they're seeing, and are going to have more access to true data that shows how companies are actually investing in clean tech and investing in greening their own companies. So everything is trending the right way. There will be speed bumps. I mean, look, we had a speed bump on the GM story. GM is all in about making electric vehicles. They want it by 2025 to have 20, 30 models that are EV, but they're going to have issues with batteries on occasion. That's just the reality of the game. So great story. Makes me feel very confident.
Yeah, this is great to see.
Cool. Well, those are my three, and I think you have three of your own, correct?
All right, yeah. Here's one from September 6th. This is from 4 days ago. This is Jonathan Saul from Reuters on sustainable business. Shipping industry proposes levy to speed up zero carbon future. This is very, very interesting. So this is about the shipping industry. They have their own organization called the IMO, the International Maritime Organization. And they've been kind of avoiding carbon taxes in places like Europe because they kind of work in international waters. And so they're actually coming around and saying, hey, we need to have our own kind of carbon tax levied on our industry. So I just I just found this was an incredible story. Like, I don't know any other industry that says, hey, please tax us more. So this is amazing. They want to get on board with, climate goals and carbon reducing efforts. And so they're willing to do, some market-based measures, which I like, right? So they're going to increase the price of carbon-based transportation on the waters. So this is great. I'm really happy with this. I'd love to see them use this money to promote more zero carbon transportation on the oceans, right?
I thought it was a great story. I think what is it, 3% of carbon generation in the world comes from maritime fleets. So it's a significant number. Yeah, 3% of the world's CO2 emissions is coming from global transportation and sea transportation. So I think this is a great incentive to get shipbuilders and developers and fleet owners to switch to green. The one good thing is about the size of these ships that they can look at some alternatives that may not be practical for, say, truck driving. And like the one example, of course, screams out is LNG. You can have liquefied natural gas ships. Of course, everyone's talking about green hydrogen still. That may be a little bit off in the future, but there are ways to improve. I think even the capabilities and the emissions from the existing, diesel engines have improved greatly over the years. So at least there's existing technology that's being improved. And then you could switch us to a bridge technology like LNG, and then you could probably take it to even something like hydrogen after that. So a lot going on. Very happy to see it.
Yeah, I've seen some innovative storage technologies for ocean going vessels. If you think about it, weight isn't that big of an issue, right? Because it just displaces more water and nobody cares. So you can have a heavier battery that you wouldn't think about in a car. So you can look at different technologies for storage if you want to go electric. So I've seen some interesting work in that area.
Yep, love it.
I just thought this was a crazy story. I had to share it with you guys. And my final two are actual clean tech stories because we are clean tech. So this one from Fast Company, which is more of a startup focused magazine. This is from September 3rd. Wildly reinvented wind turbine generates 5 times more energy than its competitors. Right. This is the wind turbine. So notice that it looks totally different than any other wind turbine you've ever seen. So I find this really, really interesting. So what it does, it has all these little wind turbine blades in here inside the structure instead of one big one. And I really thought this was great. It doesn't have the author's name, which is kind of weird. Because this design, distributes the generation over a larger area. You also get to a higher level. And also this one is easier to maintain because if you have one of the turbines break, you only lose 1 out of 100 turbines. So you're 99% still operational. And you don't have to shut the whole thing down. You're just going to replace the one turbine. And so it still stays operational. So from an operation standpoint, this is far, far superior. So I think this is interesting that if you have a physicist and an engineer work together to design something, you get the turbines we already have. But if you have an operator sit with an engineer and say, no, design it this way, this is what you get. So really interested to see this. I'd like to see these. I think these float also. So you can put them anywhere. You can put them in deeper water.
These are floaters.
Yeah.
By the way, the author is Elisaveta Brandon. I hope I said her first name right. But
Okay.
I was blown back by this, and this is one of those smack your forehead articles. You're like, look at it. You're like, why didn't someone think of this ahead of time? This looks ingenious.
Yeah.
And what I like about this, they don't show it, but I suspect if one of those blades go out, you can almost have a robot tied to the scaffolding that just has a replacement blade that it could switch out almost on its own, like to do something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I read a similar article during our off period about a month ago that talked about how I think it was in The Economist too, where people really feel that offshore wind can actually get bigger. It can go further out, and it can create floating platforms that may have some technical issues about replacing damaged turbines. But it seems like there's been a lot of technology and time dedicated to making an improved floating platform, so you can have it further out in the ocean where the wind actually is. So really happy to see this type of innovation. And I thought this was a great article. Really inspired me.
Yeah, really cool. innovation. Another great innovation, this one out of newatlas.com in their energy group by Nick Lavars. Experimental chlorine battery holds 6 times more charge than lithium ion. So this is experimental, it's in the R part of R&D. This is from August 29th out of Stanford University. They've developed a chlorine-based prototype battery with 6 times the capacity of today's lithium ion devices. This is fantastic to hear. Sodium chlorine battery. Yes, they have tried this before and failed. The reason is, if you've ever been in a swimming pool, that chlorine ions are extremely destructive to any kind of germs that get in there. And so they tend to be very volatile and difficult to have in a battery. And so the main innovation here is that they have a new electrode that takes these chlorine ions that are very destructive and kind of pulls them out and keeps them contained. So yeah, see here, made of a porous carbon that acts like a sponge, soaking up the erratic chlorine molecules, making them safe to be converted back to sodium chloride. So they just found a kind of engineering trick to make the chemistry stable, and now you can get more energy density in here. So very interested to see these come around. It'll probably be 5 to 10 years, but when these hit, it's going to be really interesting.
This is a great article. I love the innovation again. I kept jokingly thinking about how all our doctors collectively want us to have less sodium intake. So now we can convert our sodium from our table salt all the way to putting it into something even more productive, which is clean energy. I like this story as well. And there's a lot of people chasing different battery technologies. And of course, I think there's no clarity about where the ultimate winner will be. So again, this is one of those that, I always worry about the risk return of, are we spending so much, focusing on different battery techs that we're wasting capital? And the reality is we probably will in some extent, but I think this is worth pursuing, because anything we can do to make batteries more efficient is going to make the green energy adoption more economical and faster. So it was a really good story.
Yeah, so love to see battery tech. I love to read about that. Any kind of battery tech I want to see, I want to learn. I want to see, what the cycle life is, what the energy density is, and how easy it is to produce, manufacture, source the raw materials, right? So if you make it out of some exotic metal, that's not going to help us, right? So
yeah. Oh, great articles. And I think it's kind of funny because I feel like I was more the pessimistic one, because I brought up, GM's issue right now. I brought up, Hurricane Ida and the destructiveness. And then you kind of took it to the positive, right? Which was, here's the technologies that are in play right now. It just shows that the struggle will continue, but we're going to be here monitoring it.
Yeah, Ida just kind of reminds us that it's real, it's getting worse. I don't know if you've seen the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. They're not slowing down, they're not reversing course. The IPCC report was really kind of depressing for the industry, right? They kind of gave up on 1.5 degrees. They don't even have a projection for anything below 1.5 degrees. So it's getting close to crunch time. And I still wonder, like, what is it going to take? What is it going to take for people, for decision makers, for citizens, for voters, for businesses to start saying, hey, this is a real problem. We can't just do business as usual. We have to do something. So I think that date is still off in the future, which is upsetting.
I see it in, at least in my time in financial services, I saw it more and more, where every decision made by big banks is going to incorporate an ESG element associated with it. And some of that may be fluff, some of it may be greenwashing, but again, I think it'll migrate to investment decisions making across the board where ESG is standard. I think 5 years from now, there will be no ESG funds, or they're going to be so prevalent that it's going to be a part of your investment across the board, that You're not going to differentiate between one or the other. It's going to be the standard. So, again, we ask people, I say this all the time on my social media to my friends and family, we all could be doing things individually, reducing our plastic usage, being smarter, switching from a traditional ICE lawnmower to an electric lawnmower. For every 30 lawnmowers replaced by an electric lawnmower, you're taking the equivalent of one gasoline car off the road. So these are things that can be done over the next couple of years. Every little step helps. I'm still a believer in the Trillion Tree program, although I haven't heard much about it lately, as a major solution to getting us to staying under the 2 degree centigrade. cap by 2050. It's not the only solution, but it makes a lot of sense to me. So as long as we kind of collectively keep coming up with these ideas and executing on them very quickly, we can get there.
Yeah, I agree. And as long as we keep making progress every day, we'll get there faster than you think we will.
Yep. So, Lucas, why don't you tell us right now on a very limited basis about how people can participate in Pirates of Clean Tech and where we're at?
Sure, we're on. I think you should watch us on YouTube so you see our beautiful faces and you get to go through the articles with us. So I think that's a good idea. You can find us. We're Pirates of Clean Tech on YouTube. You click the subscribe button. And then if you want to get the alerts for when our newest video hits, you hit that little bell and then it'll pop up on your phone. It'll say, hey, the new episode is up, and then you'll be the first to know. We're also on your favorite podcast site. Pretty much we're on more than 10 podcast sites, I think. And so you can just search for Pirates of Clean Tech and click subscribe, and then you'll get our latest podcast that you can listen to at your leisure. We're for instance, we're on Apple podcasts. So
yep. For those who are just getting to know us at Pirates, some of our historical library is not on the podcast venue anymore. It may go up. We're not sure just quite yet, but everything is up on our YouTube page. So we recommend people to, you don't have to watch us if you're busy doing the laundry, but, put your earphones on, get your laundry done, and you could listen to us. You could look at our beautiful faces for a few minutes. And once you're overwhelmed, you could switch to audio. But, our historical library there's some great episodes, especially for those who really want to get to know specific topics. Most of those topics are in the title of our episodes.
Yeah, and we had some great guests. We had former chair of FERC. We had some experts from Houston with the blackout there. We had some just great episodes. The ESG expert,
former the godfather of the Nissan Leaf was on, who's doing great things. So, and we had really one of my favorites was a bond expert who she just really rocked it and explained to people what green bonds are really all about. So
yeah,
we look forward to having some more guests in the future. We're going to be figuring out our formats as Lucas and I are both transitioning our careers, but we appreciate any feedback, any suggestions. And of course, our typical disclaimer, the views expressed by Lucas and I are solely those of ourselves and not any organizations we're affiliated with. Always good to get that out. And we should also say any companies we talk about, we are not making any implicit or explicit recommendation about the security associated with it.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, and with that, this was a pretty quick episode, but welcome back, Lucas. Great to see you on again, and great to be back on the podcast.
Yeah, welcome back, Eric. It's good to be back. Welcome back to our listeners and viewers. It's good to have you, and let's keep up the good fight.
Excellent. So with that, I'm Eric Planey.
I'm Lucas Finko.
And we are the returned, not so rusty Pirates of Clean Tech.
Yar.
Arr.
Arr.